discovering all the problems that like a senior software engineer would discover over a 10-year career just in a week.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Send prompts, not nudes. I just want to AI some shit.
Welcome to DNAI Podcast, where we think, we drink, and we complain mostly about AI and how horrible it is.
Oh, we love AI. It's making our lives better. That's what we say.
Yeah. I go back to one of the summer comments, James. Are we in control or is AI?
We don't know anymore.
Yeah. How much of this is me and how much of this is AI?
Maybe the bugs are what AI wants us to be working on.
Yeah. What you drinking, James?
Today I am busting out the tequila. We've got some Casa Dragones. It's a
Big guns.
It's a tequila añejo, 100% pure agave azul. It's very, very, very delicious.
James is feeling the weekend.
Nice.
That's right.
Sir, Randy,
I am drinking.
You just got knighted.
I got drinking my Scotch Oban 14. Nice, favorite of mine.
I am Rebel 10-year.
Rebel 10.
Yeah, I really.
Where's that one from again? Is that a Texas? Which
Lux
one's that?
Row?
Oh, that's Lux. Okay.
Yeah, it's like one of my. So I have to say, bang for buck, just get regular Rebel. It's just really good. But the 10-year, if you see it and it's at, normal shelf price, I'd buy it. But anything over, definitely nah. I'd just buy the regular Rebel.
Well, you can't go wrong with anything from Lux.
No,
they did that. They've got the Ezra Brooks now, right?
Yep, they do, and that is bang. That talk about bang for buck, Randy. If you see that, you're talking about bourbon last episode.
Yeah. Which is that?
Ezra 7-year. If you see that on the shelf, for what was it, $60, $70 usually? They upped the price. It was cheaper, but man, that is a brutally good buy.
Yep.
What's the other one? It's black wax top. Good comparison to what would it be called?
Are you talking about the Are you talking about? Oh, I've got it right here.
Evan Williams, single barrel. Yeah. Oh,
yep.
$30. Well, it used to be. I don't know what it is now, but it used to be $30 a bottle. They're all 7 to 14 year, depending on the luck of the draw, and they're $30.
Yeah.
It's so good. Beats Blanton's hands down every day, especially because it's cheaper.
Yeah. Talking about bang for buck, that's a good one. I think I picked up a few of those when I was on the bourbon trail.
All right. So right before we were talking about vibe coding.
Right.
We were talking about vibe coding.
How is your vibe?
How awesome, but how not awesome it can also be.
Don't look away for too long.
It is the topic du jour, I think, in AI these days.
I want to know who came up with the term.
Oh,
it might have been Levels.
Did you? What was his name?
Peter Levels. He's a freelancer developer guy who basically couch surfs and builds stuff. He's just been doing that since before AI. But I think it was either him or it was what's his name? The guy who was Tesla and OpenAI.
Whoever it was,
Andre Karpathy.
Yeah, I can't remember. I remember reading about it though, and whoever it was kind of known in the coding world.
It was, I think Andre Karpathy had a post on it that once he said it, kind of
became a thing,
became mainstream. Yep.
You know what I think's fun? Rue, right? Vibe coding. So before Rue, it was Klein.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there'll be 10 more after this in the next 6 months. But essentially before Rue and being able to set a commander and have agents go out and do things on behalf of each other or be commanded, you acted as the commander.
Right.
I still do. I find it most of the time Commander with Rue doesn't work for me. It does on a fresh build, but if I'm working with an existing code base, there's too much nonsense. It gets confused. But that could be the way I've got it configured, and I think customizing is one of the nice things about Rue versus other setups.
Yeah, Rue did make an announcement, by the way. I don't know if you knew this, but dot clines don't work in Rue anymore. They don't, and they do. But they're not designed to work, so you have to change it over to Rue rules. If you're not in the Discord, you should definitely join. But they made that announcement and update, and Rue has been a little bit of a pain in the butt on some of the. I don't know if you guys have the white screen lockups.
Yes, I still get those. I still get the white screens. Yep.
Yeah, I'm getting those in cursor. James, you're about to say something.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, Randy. I'm sure you've already looked into this, but I noticed that if you go into the settings and you turn on power steering, it sort of like reiterates those like agent prompts more frequently. Because I always run into that. Before I was running into that as well, where it like the orchestrator, like I use a Spark orchestrator, and sometimes it orchestrates and sometimes it doesn't. But when you turn the power steering on, it seems to at least be a little bit more agentic, I guess you could say.
I've seen power steering. It's
in the settings. Yeah. If you open it up, I love Rue for the customization aspect.
Yeah.
And then what's interesting or becoming interesting that I've started to notice, even with like Manus and some of the other more autonomous AI, is those markdown files that you're putting into the environment are becoming more like chains of thought that you can apply to different problems. Some you can get that into some of the prompts, but it's almost like what we were doing with some of the GPTs like a year ago, trying to get them to do more, and you're limited to that like 8,000 prompt insert. It's like, okay, we'll put a bunch of documents in and we'll make the prompt go search for this part of the document and use that prompt.
I'm starting just the other day, I started trying to tree of thought some of this stuff. So I will have like kind of like my base, base orchestrator create different paths for different part of the projects that are sort of uniform from a development perspective. And then I open up different windows. So I'll actually open up different parts of my code base that I build. So, and then I have Rue only like focused, isolated in specific parts of the code base where the markdowns are dropped. That way I can get like multiple sessions of Rue building out my code base in unison. So very risky.
So yeah, well, that comes down to the watching. But so I'm going to ask a couple of questions so you can clarify for those that are listening. First question is, why do you open certain parts of the code, and what does that actually do for Rue?
Oh, I think of it like attention span. So if I don't want, Rue tends to go like, it's great because it can contextualize your code base, right? But sometimes I don't want it. Sometimes I want it more focused on more granular level tasks. And when I want to do that, I just I open it up in a subsection, because then it only looks at that. Because I turn my setting off for it to be able to look beyond the current directory that you booted up on. So like the most useful way that I'm using that is if I'm starting a project and I want to build out a skeleton, and I don't necessarily care right off the bat if it's all cohesive and working. That's where I sort of like have these multiple code sessions built out simultaneously, and then I go back and try to connect the dots.
No, you're spot on. So there's a setting in Rue that when you open something in the section that you're in, it knows contextually, like it actually is part of the prompt. The thing that you can really do if you want it to focus and either make changes to certain files or not is hashtag them, or whatever your code base is, comment, and in the top of the file, put only make changes in this file until told otherwise, or like put a rule in there. And you can do that with file by file. So essentially locking it out of files, even though it can see them. And if you do it at the top and bottom of the file, when it goes to do the read, it'll even catch itself sometimes and be like, oh, I'm not supposed to touch this file, because it gets to the end and it like goes, I'm going to reverse my changes, and it'll go backwards.
So what's your method for doing that? Because I thought the way I saw how to do it, and there's probably a million ways to do it, but there's like a .ru ignore or
I don't use it.
You don't use that?
Nope, I don't use the .ru ignore unless it's like, you know, a .github or .env, and I don't want it touching stuff. It's like sometimes it'll go in there and like totally jack your .env to high heaven. But for the most part, if I'm trying to get it to like, I know the problem is in this file, but in order for it to understand how the things work together, it needs this directory or it needs files over here. I'll open those up, just like you said, containerize it, lock that group, put a ru in there, and then while it's in there, in the top and bottom, I'll comment out, depending on the code base. So when I comment out top and bottom, it reads it, and sometimes it ignores it. It will go, you know, sometimes it goes fast and it will forget or not see it. But usually if it forgets and it hits the bottom, it'll cycle back and be like, I wasn't supposed to touch this file, and then go right back and revert it. And then for the most part, it's actually pretty good at seeing it right at the top of the file and be like, oh, I'm only allowed to read this file. And literally just like you would read permissions, like RBAC almost, you say, this file is read only to ru. And it works. So that's been my biggest problem lately with some of the code bases, because I guess I'm getting into that. The code's getting really complex. Randy loves to always say I over code things, or over complex, or over code, or over.
It's not you, John. The AI does it.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I'm not.
It does it to me too. So that's the biggest problem.
So, but if you, like you were saying, James, if you let it run, it will run, and like you'll get back and be like, oh. So it's not to that level yet where, especially depending on how big the code base is, it's good enough to just do everything. And usually the bigger the change that you're trying to make, the higher likelihood it's going to go and do crazy. But I've kind of found if I like need to take one directory and I need to convert it, like, hey, I really want all this TypeScript and I want to make it a Python endpoint. And I can I just grab that section and I say, you're allowed to change these things, but these things need to stay. A lot higher success rate. I think the other tip, James, that I actually started to use that you gave me was pseudocode. Have it pseudocoded out, which I wasn't using. I was doing the markdown stuff, but I really hadn't touched pseudocode in a while other than prompting. But that works pretty good with Ru.
Yep. It works great. I get in trouble with pseudocode. Like I like starting projects with it. And then making sure that there's clear organization of code that's segmented from my like live build, and I was just running into this yesterday. Sometimes Ru will mix and match pieces of code from your pseudocode and your live code. It'll try to hook up endpoints or APIs from your pseudocode to your live code or vice versa. And so it kind of tangles in like the different connective tissues that should be happening separately from your pseudocode environment. So it's one of those things, like I think strong organization helps, but also order of operation. If I'm going to keep pseudocoding again, I'm going to do all that first, and then move into building live, right? If you kind of switch back and forth, if you're not really paying attention, it'll go off on the rails, and then you'll have functional code and it'll work. And I've even gotten things to work in a live environment using things from pseudocode. and then you move into the next part of your project and it all breaks, and then you unpeel the onion and it's like, oops.
Well, I think to your pseudocode point, it's kind of interesting because you start to realize how much code is just like moving a little bit of thing here and a little bit of thing there, and it's not really anything that matters forward facing to the user, but it's like,
right.
But if you don't do it, just this little data point has to go from this context over here to this thing. And if that state isn't changed properly, like it all breaks. I had to do this with a slider for light and dark mode when I was building the stuff this week, and I didn't realize that at least in the code that I was building, how that state was caught, not just the fact that it was changed, but how it was caught, is the difference between a seizure, because you're discoing or strobe lighting your UI, or like, and I'm sitting there like, why is it doing this? Yep, there it goes. Nice. Not for viewers with epilepsy. But I'm sitting there like staring at the UI like, this makes no sense. Why would it do this? And just like an API, like that state had to be caught by something else, and whatever order of operations was happening when that was changed just didn't catch it, and it was like forever flashing back and forth.
Yep. Fun times. But
we're discovering all the problems that like a senior software engineer would discover over a 10-year career just in a week.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because we're also seeing the limitations of the AI, right? What would be, I think, the next step where vibe coding is headed is in knowledge, right? So being able to, and probably like graph, like knowledge graph type of knowledge, being able to, if your AI could understand your classes, your functions, your different levels of parent-child relationship within the code, your dependencies, right? All that good stuff. And it could see, okay, I'm working in this file. This file is related to these specific things in these specific ways. It probably provides that next level of context for decision making, between saying like, oh, I'm going to build this in pseudocode versus nope, shouldn't do this in pseudocode, right? Shouldn't be referencing this file because that's pseudocode, or whatever scenario it is. I think that could be a huge booster in, what would you call it? Not really coherence, but
I feel like software development is on the same kind of ladder as most things with AI are, but it's earlier, right? Like developers are going to build developer tools before they build, writing tools, for example, if people who are doing that. But the point being that, like where the state of the art is with Rue today, that's kind of our roadmap where Nexus Canvas goes, when you can start having, agents that call each other, that have kind of a, hierarchical or collaborative component, and then reliable judgment, right? I think one of the things is that Rue or any AI today is not trustworthy when it thinks a task is done, or the task that is being done is in alignment with what the original user intent is. It's not for a lack of documentation or explanation. There's still like a gap, or the context window becomes too large, and it loses the thread, right?
And that's why like John was saying, that those markdown files, right? That's why those are so important, because even when you're creating new tasks, you're essentially starting from a blank slate, right? Like I always the way I approach it is I just assume the model knows nothing about even though it has access to the code base, even had, I just assume that it doesn't know any intention or anything like that. So in those sort of like markdown files, that contextual bridge, for lack of a better term, those are super important, and those get cluttered too. Right? I've got like 50 markdown files. I'm like, I should probably delete some of these.
I have two fun questions. So first one is, so what does this mean for coders? Like let's say that code agents don't get better, which is horseshit. Like in 3 months it'll be completely different. But let's pretend they don't get better. What does this do for coding? Like where we're currently at today?
Oh, I mean, it massively accelerates your development.
Do you think most companies are seeing that though?
Well,
I have no idea. It depends on the company. It probably depends on the industry and the amount of regulation and the speed at which it's, these sorts of things are being allowed, right? Because and it depends on the configuration right now, right? Rue and Klein are great because you can use Anthropic's Claude, which has token caching, which has computer use, which has vision, right? So like, and this was remember, John, this is like my big aha, right? When I was trying to use OpenAI and reasoning models, and it just and it's more hassle than it's worth. So I guess to me, it really just depends on what the risk appetite is of the company and right now, if they're willing to let external API calls happen. So I imagine smaller companies are probably seeing more benefit than larger ones.
Oh yeah, there's definitely there's a risk on so there's definitely a lot of companies don't want their code going external to do generations, right? So if you're in like AWS and you can have a private instance of Claude, that's a benefit versus if you're not. But I think the other thing too is that most serious engineering leadership don't trust a vibe coded code base yet, for good reason, right? So we're not seeing that much, I think, at the large scale come into production beyond proof of concept.
But I think no one's like 6 months about it in a regulated or in a actual workplace, but I can guarantee it. Every single coder is using it.
No, everybody's using it, and it's probably more prevalent in most enterprise than leadership realizes, right?
Oh,
yeah. Big shadow IT, you know, we've had basic shadow IT, and then we had shadow AI, now we have shadow vibe code. But anybody who can code something that makes their job easier will do it. Security be damned. So that's a problem. But actual like enterprise applications of it, I think they're still coming, and it's going to be another 6-12 months before, like, you know, some large company comes out and says, we vibe coded this, right?
Yep.
And you know, we completely autonomously built this piece of software that's now in our customer hands. I think we'll see some startups and some, like, you know, tech forward, like fintechs do it, but it'll be a while before everybody else kind of gets comfortable.
But I mean, it's literally just, now it's just as easy as this. Like, hey, see this thing that I'm on right now? Yes. I like, and code that application right there.
Yep. Okay. I had to look it up because I remember I was reading a stat about this and I couldn't remember what it was, but it was actually a Y Combinator. They did a survey and they were seeing 25% of startups reported that 95% of their code bases are AI generated.
Yep.
And Google, more than 25% of new code that they're generating is AI generated.
Well, actually, this is a fun topic because think about this, James. We have a game that we really like, and they you know, they've only been a decade in the development phase, and what has happened over the last like 6 months?
I would be shocked. I would be shocked if they are not vibe coding their features.
Dude, there's no way. The amount of acceleration is just insane.
Yeah,
absolutely
it is. And we've been following them for years, and it's like curious all of a sudden.
Dude, they got rid of like half their developers, and it's like they hit turbo mode.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like, okay. I don't give a shit if the game's good and it plays. Like, game on.
I was gonna say that, you know, talking about outcomes, right?
Ever played.
Like, the game's getting better. So I would say, like, circling back to your question, you know, like you put this sort of tech in the right hands, in the hands of, you know, especially these developers they know what they're doing with it. I think it's an accelerator. And
yeah, so I have 2 other questions for both of you on this. All right, so this brings me to my favorite Linkin Park song. In the end, does it really matter?
If it works, it works.
But back to, you know, Randy, outcomes. Cha-ching. You know, I look at Microsoft and like the stuff that they're literally just like farting out. Like, I say that, but it's like 5.4 comes out and nobody makes a sound. They drop it, and like 5.4 is really good for the size and what it's capable of, and multimodal, and the fact that they don't give a shit and you can go code it, like just totally reswizzle it and make it yours, like right now. it's awesome. But the thing that we've talked about, like generative gaming, right, and running. So like, and I think we may have brought it up on this podcast, but we've talked about generative software at a certain extent. Like when is generative software here? Well, so you guys remember the WAM model that Microsoft made? It was like playing games and stuff.
Not really.
Not really. Okay, so it was like they played Doom on it, and I think they played some other game. And it was pretty cool. Like they were doing like 20 frames or 30 frames. So they have a new version of that. So the old model took 7 years to train of video games. The new model took 1 week of Quake 2.
Nice.
And it looks like Quake 2. Like there isn't the screen tearing. There isn't it looks like you're playing Quake 2.
Yeah. I've also played some of those. I played a Minecraft one. It was pretty good, but it made me nauseous.
The frame rate.
Everything. Well, it's not just the frame rate. It was like
tearing.
Even like the blocks and things would they're generating constantly.
Yeah.
So sometimes the ground kind of moves. Sometimes the creepers spawn right in front of you and explode.
So you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of NVIDIA. Like when you look at it and you're watching it play, it reminds me of what is the NVIDIA DLSS? Like
DLSS.
When you have it on low, it's like rendering, and then like sometimes something pops in, like, you know, as you get closer, it almost looks like the model is operating off of that same training in a way.
Right.
But like just the fact that like I think the last time we talked about this, we were talking about 20 frames a second, and now we're talking about a much more advanced game, with a lot more things going on, and we're twice the pixel density, and at like 60 frames, and it's on. Guess you want to hear the really crazy part? 1.6 billion parameters.
Oh yeah, that's great.
800 call enable if you want to
enable me.
Enable me. Yeah, I like that better. Thanks, Randy. If you want to join our podcast, oh, by the way, that's a fake number, so don't call, or do, and then tell us.
Or do.
Yeah, and then throw a comment on one of the socials on who answered, because I would be curious to know.